Well, folks, it's time to talk about burner phones. Even if you've never heard that term, you've probably seen them in use, be it in real life, in movies, TV shows, or wherever. As long as we've had cell phones, we've had burner phones, and they're still an invaluable tool for a lot of situations. So let's take some time to cover what they are, why they're useful, and how to use them safely. Before we get started though, I would like to point out that this video is a follow-up to my Hacker's Guide to Securing Your Smartphone, Phone Security 101 video, and I strongly recommend you watch that video before this one, as it will provide you with a solid foundation of security techniques and practices that will also have a lot of carryover to burner phones. If you've already watched that video, drop a comment with a TV emoji to let me know. Also, I think it's important for me to mention that the FCC has recently proposed a ruling that would require Know Your Customer policies from all service providers, effectively meaning that burners would no longer be anonymous. I've linked the proposal in the description, though we are unfortunately past the comment period. Hopefully they understood all the reasons this would be a terrible idea, but we'll see moving forward. Now, without any further ado, let's talk about what a burner phone is and why you would want to use one. The short answer is that a burner phone is a second phone that you use for activities that you don't want associated with your primary phone. But you're not here for the short answer, so let's talk details. To quote the 5-time platinum song by American rapper, singer, and songwriter Kevin Gates, and each serve a different purpose. The first is my personal phone, the one that I use to communicate with friends and family. The second is a burner phone. This is a phone I use for things I don't want tied to my main line. Maybe I just want to sell something online. Maybe I'm getting involved in some kind of activism. Doesn't really matter. The purpose remains the same. Of course, it wouldn't be a proper data security video if I didn't mention the fact that there are some corporations out there that looked at the game Watch Dogs and said, you know what? We should make that real. Then started selling mass surveillance tools to the federal government. You're probably already thinking of one of the big ones, Palantir, and you'd be correct in that assessment. Their tool Foundry is a software that's used to aggregate and analyze huge amounts of data and parse that data into patterns. This includes phone records, geolocation data, and various other data from cellular providers and their services. While Palantir's Alex Karp insists that their tools are not being used directly to spy on US citizens, it is well known that their data analytics software is used by various federal agencies from law enforcement to ICE, who we have seen pushing the boundaries of their authority in major ways lately. At this point, I would not be surprised to hear in a few years that various federal agencies abused their authority and did in fact spy on citizens. That's one of the more important reasons you should want a burner. When it comes to your burner, the same techniques as protecting your smartphone will apply, but if you're anything like me, then you would probably prefer to use a dumb phone for the extra layers of obfuscation and security. What's a dumb phone? Well, let me explain. You're probably already aware that a smartphone is a device with a touchscreen and internet connectivity that is capable of installing all kinds of apps from some kind of centralized marketplace. So, to put it simply, a dumb phone is the older variations of phones that were on the market before smartphones really took off. Think of the old flip phones you see in movies or TV shows. Most of those are considered dumb phones. They don't have a touchscreen, they don't have an app store, and for the most part, they don't even have internet connectivity at all. These devices generally are going to have very weak security features. That means those Stingray signal interceptors we talked about in the last video will have no problem intercepting communications from these devices. At this point, you're probably wondering how using one of these weaker devices could possibly be a good idea, and it's because that weakness can also be a strength. These devices are usually cheap, and that makes burning them a lot easier on your wallet. So with that in mind, let's talk about choosing a burner phone. There are an absolute ton of options for devices you could use that would serve well as a burner phone. The scale ranges from having a separate dumb phone, to a second smartphone, all the way to running 2 SIM cards in the same device. Each option has their pros and cons, so I'm going to take a moment to cover those. First, let's talk about having a second smartphone. This gives you the same full capability as your personal device, will likely use more secure network protocols, and will allow you to install pretty much whatever apps you choose. This can be a great option if you just want separation of communication for very light activities. Maybe you just have 2 different friend groups, or maybe you run a business of some sort and want to use your primary as your dedicated line for that. The purpose does matter when choosing a device, but if you aren't worried about the deeper details of being extremely secure, then following my Phone Security 101 video with a second smartphone isn't necessarily a bad idea. Your second option is to get a primary phone that has 2 SIM slots. These devices allow you to flip back and forth between the 2 IMSIs and in turn the 2 phone numbers to serve the purpose of 2 phones in one device. This, like having a second smartphone and following my Phone Security 101 video, can be a relatively safe and secure way of doing things, as long as you aren't getting up to anything where the IMEI of your device would be a concern. That's where our last option comes in. Finally, you can get a dumb phone. This is the option I recommend the most for those trying to be as private and secure as possible, and is the option that most folks generally are referring to when discussing burner phones. So why do I recommend dumb phones over the other 2 options, and why are they what most people think of when discussing this topic? With all of the modern features of smartphones, it can be pretty easy to fall into the trap of thinking that it would be just as good of an option as a dumb phone for use as a burner, but there are several reasons why that just isn't the case. Of course, some of the more obvious reasons may immediately come to mind, such as the potential of being tracked by apps and tools that are built into the device. That's definitely a concern with smartphones, as all of them have some pretty advanced GPS technology built straight in that you can't outright disable without some serious work. And older dumb phones typically won't have anything close to that modern level of GPS, if it has one at all. You can also include Wi-Fi and in many cases Bluetooth here, as depending on the model you get, these technologies most likely won't be included either. I should probably also mention that they are significantly cheaper than even the cheapest smartphones that are worth buying. It's not that difficult to find dumb phones for $10 to $30, while the most affordable reasonable smartphone option will float somewhere around $100. When you consider the fact that these devices are entirely intended to be abandoned at a moment's notice, then the price really starts to shine, as $10 is a lot easier to throw away than $100. If you started with my Phone Security 101 video, then you probably have realized that while it's not a significant concern to those who actively fortify their security, smartphones, like any other computer, can be hacked or infected with malware. Typically, this is going to come from installing applications or by downloading some kind of malicious file. That isn't really a concern with dumb phones. There is no internet connection. There is no app store. As long as you aren't downloading any kind of files from text messages, then the chance of your dumb phone being compromised are near zero. Even if it does get compromised, as long as you follow the correct steps to protect your privacy and security with your burner, then it shouldn't cause you any problems. This includes compromise by law enforcement. Sure, they have the technology to bust into a dumb phone at a pretty staggering speed. But if you've used it correctly, then as long as they didn't pull it straight out of your pocket or property, it can still be pretty difficult for them to have any use for that as evidence, because it would be pretty hard to tie it back to its owner. Of course, that is heavily reliant on you actually using it correctly, which this video intends to teach you how to do. Now, there are also some deeper concerns that you likely never even considered to be a problem. In the case of buying a personal phone, what I'm about to mention isn't really a concern, but when it comes to a burner, it absolutely can be. When buying a new smartphone, you're generally going to have to use some kind of service or store that requires some sort of identification from you. This can be as simple as a credit card with your name on it to fund your account, to as far as taking actual copies of your ID and running credit checks before selling you the device. This isn't always the case, as with some services like eBay, you can purchase with just a credit card or PayPal account, but that's still a delivery address and your payment method that can be tracked back to you. That's something we want to completely avoid when setting up a burner, so that means we need to acquire the device and prepaid plan with cash. That's going to be a lot easier to accomplish with a dumb phone. So, let's talk about where and how to get a burner. While getting a burner may seem straightforward, we already know that we have some serious considerations when it comes to acquiring one. We obviously don't want to go to big box retailers that are going to have surveillance cameras and be primarily selling smartphones. So, where do we go? Easy. Do a Google search for cell phone store near me, and you'll find your answer. There are mom and pop type stores all over the place. Sometimes, you'll find them as straight up cell phone stores. Other times, you'll find them as repair shops that also sell devices and plans. These type of stores are your best bet for obtaining your device. Sometimes the device will be pre-packed with a plan including some amount of minutes to get you started, but in some cases, you'll be purchasing them separately. If you've purchased a device by itself, then while purchasing your device, you could also go ahead and buy a prepaid plan, which would include a SIM card and minutes, but if you're trying to take extra steps to be cautious, then maybe buy the device and prepaid plan at separate stores. You don't want to look too suspicious when buying this stuff, but you likely also don't want your face plastered all over a surveillance camera. So consider how you're dressing when you go to purchase your device and minutes. Maybe a ball cap and an N95 mask with normal clothing would be appropriate so that you just look like someone who is health conscious. Maybe that would be suspicious in your area. That's up to you to decide, but that's something you may want to consider if trying to be as private as possible with these purchases. And considering what we know now with Palantir and Flock, you may also want to consider wearing sunglasses as an alternative or in conjunction with the medical face mask, as facial recognition tools have gotten to a pretty concerningly dystopian level. Either way, make sure you pay with cash, as that's the only untraceable payment option. I'm sure some of you are thinking that those bills could be tracked back by using the surveillance cameras, but I assure you there is very little chance that those bills don't pass hands over to the bank before anyone even thinks to look into who they belong to, assuming you aren't using the device the same day you purchase it. Now that you've got your device and prepaid plan, let's move on to activating your burner. I realize that a fair bit of my audience are probably a little too young to have ever activated a prepaid plan before, so I might as well explain the best way to approach doing so with a burner. Every prepaid plan that you buy will include a SIM card, and typically the best way to activate them is to put the SIM in your device, turn it on, and call the activation number listed in the manual or on the box. Now, we do want to consider some things when it comes to when and how specifically to go about activating. In a few moments, we'll go into greater detail about why, but I do want to mention here that it's best not to activate your burner around your personal device. You also don't want to have the two devices active near each other at any time. My biggest recommendation here is to wait until you make it through the rest of the video before choosing to buy a prepaid plan or to activate your burner. I also would recommend that you don't activate it until you need it and do it as far away from home as possible. The catch here is that pretty much any prepaid plan you buy will have an activate by date on it that will disable the SIM if it's not activated by a certain date. You can either hold off on buying your SIM card in minutes until you know you're going to be needing your burner, or you can go ahead and activate it while following the steps in this guide to keep the signals of your two devices separated, which we should probably go ahead and talk about. It's no secret that cellular service providers actively work with law enforcement when it comes to investigations, including those around protests, and even those centered around cop watchers and journalists. We know that they can obtain full access to call logs, text logs, IMEI and IMSI collection data, GPS positioning data, and much more. They can and also do use stingray devices to man-in-the-middle attack phones in the area, intercepting and tracking the devices, messages, and calls made within the area of effect. This means that we want our personal devices absolutely nowhere near our burner devices at any point when they are powered on. If those two devices are powered on next to each other, then law enforcement can easily make the case that both devices belong to the same person, and since they can identify one, it's simple to identify the other, completely defeating the purpose of having a burner in the first place. So, under no circumstance should these two devices be powered on next to each other, and arguably, even when powered off, they could potentially be used to locate you if one or both are a smartphone. Now, I know what you're thinking here. If they could still be tracked even when powered off, how exactly are we supposed to have two devices? Well, maybe with a Faraday bag. In my Phone Security 101 video, I had a brief section about Faraday bags and mentioned how key they are for the separation of signals. It's critical that you ensure that your personal device and burner device do not cross paths when it comes to the towers they connect to. So the best way to do that is to never have them powered on at the same time and to have one of the two of them in a Faraday bag. As I mentioned in the last video, Faraday bags are incredibly powerful tools that prevent all radio signals from escaping or entering. That means when a device is inside one, it can't connect in any way to an outside network, from earbuds to cellular towers and GPS satellites. So, to take advantage of this, the best possible course of action is to power down one phone, wait a while and move to a different area, perhaps while riding public transit or after a drive somewhere else. Then swap the two phones, seal the Faraday bag, and activate the other device. If you're extra paranoid, adding a second Faraday bag into the mix here to never have both see open air at the same time will ensure there is never any crossover of signals. If the burner is never seen on the network anywhere near your personal phone, it can be a lot more difficult for investigators to prove that it belongs to you. Maybe that's useful information for all of you. Maybe it's only useful for a couple of you. Either way, now you know. For those who would like to go deeper down the rabbit hole of Faraday bags, I'll be linking a video in the description from the Save It for Parts channel where he does a deep dive into some of the commercially available Faraday bags using a signal analyzer to review the quality of the signal disruption from each of the bags. Information can be a scary thing in the wrong hands, so when it comes to a burner, we want to make sure that we properly handle the information we put on it. Our entire goal here is to prevent a connection from being made between you and that device, in whatever form that may take. Don't text or call friends or family members. Don't save the primary number of people you know. Think smart and think ahead. If you need to pull out this burner, it's probably for a pretty serious purpose, so treat it as if you're planning for that serious purpose. If you're going to save contacts in the device, do so with aliases. Don't use real names for a device like this. Preferably, you should only be saving other burners and important numbers in your own burner. If you're coordinating with others in a group, this is the time to figure out aliases and get them all saved across the phones. Just don't get too caught up in trying to come up with a cool name. Even just a single letter can work. You can get your contacts sorted out with a little bit of pre-planning and without crossing signals with your personal device by just removing the SIM card before turning your burner on. You can safely save all the contacts and then power the device off before putting the SIM card back in. The next time you turn it on, it'll still have those contacts saved, but will never have touched a cell tower until you wanted it to. If you've made it this far in the video, then clearly you aren't just trying to have an affair or any of the normie shit that a lot of folks would be watching this sort of video for. You may be a cop watcher, or planning on getting involved in an ongoing or upcoming protest. Maybe you know you're going to be involved in some shenanigans that I will, for the sake of this video's monetization, refer to as guerrilla activism, which Google defines as a form of protest that uses disruptive, creative, and often unconventional tactics to get a message out. I'll be covering some specific tips for various scenarios you may be involving yourself in later in the video, but I do want to stress the importance of everything we've covered up to this point. If you're getting involved in these types of things, then your privacy and security are paramount. You want to take the planning and approach to these types of situations as seriously as the situation calls for, and these days, that's pretty damn serious. Wrapping back around to when to use a burner phone, you'll know when it's time. If you're organizing with a group for this sort of activity, then you likely already have a protocol in place for when everyone should activate their devices. Hopefully away from each other, or at least not somewhere everyone hangs out. This is the time to ensure that the prepaid plans are working for all the devices and that those who need to have contact with each other do. Don't go outside of the protocol if you have a group. If the devices and numbers are segmented, keep them segmented. If there's any interest in group tactics for things like this, I may make a video on that in the future, but for now, anyone who understood what I just said heard what they needed to hear. For everyone else, including you solo cats walking into the eye of a storm, activate the device away from your personal device, away from your home, and ideally, as close to the location as possible. The goal is to properly burn the device before leaving anyway, so keep that activity net as small as possible. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about final considerations. So, you've decided it's time. You've followed the safety protocols, and the time has come that you need your burner. Let's run through 5 important questions first. Question 1. Do you absolutely need to have your personal device for whatever it is you're about to do? The answer to that should be no if you think the scenario dictates the use of a burner phone. To be damn sure those signals stay separate, and to let the burner do its job, it's time to leave the personal phone at home. Question 2. Have you activated your burner yet? If not, make sure you aren't doing so at home. Keep it on you until you get closer to wherever it is you're going to need the device. You should have time to activate it while on the move or once you get closer. Question 3. Do you have an exit strategy, or at least a plan to buy enough time to burn your burner if necessary? You want to try to ensure that you have ample time to take the steps you need to scrub the device when the time comes. It doesn't take long, but in some situations, seconds can feel like an eternity. Question 4. Do you have a backup plan in case the exit strategy fails midway through? What if you only have time to snap the phone in half? Have you used contact aliases? Minimized the amount of data you've put into the device? Been vague in text messages so they don't incriminate you? I hope so, and you better hope so, because if you don't manage to burn the device and it comes down to question 5, you might be pretty fucked. Final question. Question 5. What's your plan for explaining this device in an interrogation room? If you messed up bad enough to genuinely have to think about question 5, then you really should have paid more attention to this video. Back to this video, let's talk about some specific scenarios where you may want to use a burner. Using a burner for protesting is equal parts safe and dangerous, specifically due to law enforcement having the ability to deploy stingray devices around the area. I talked about these in the previous video in this series, but to quickly recap, stingrays, or cell site simulators, are powerful little boxes that emulate cellular towers and act as a man in the middle, intercepting traffic between phones in the area and the towers they intend to connect to. They do this by relying on the more insecure 2G and sometimes even 3G networks. Though these days, many law enforcement departments have upgraded their capabilities to include 4G and 5G networks, meaning a smartphone wouldn't exactly protect you here any more than a dumb phone. That means that while it can be very difficult to track a phone to you as the user, it's quite easy for them to read any message you send or receive, or hear any call placed from or to that device. Stingrays are your biggest concern when it comes to your burner device at a protest, so keep that in mind when communicating with anyone. That being said, dumb devices are still your safest option as a burner, since you can just burn it and move on with your day. Sometimes using the simplest tool instead of the most complicated obfuscation techniques can make your life a lot easier. Just look at the Taliban if you want proof. Odd example, I know, but when the United States military started intercepting their radio traffic, they switched to cheap disposable cell phones, and surprisingly, it worked pretty damn well at preventing the fox hunters from finding them. Things are obviously getting a bit concerning in our modern times, so there will be many who choose to make a stand and make their voices heard through guerrilla activism. These folks need a bit more attention to detail and pre-planning to make proper use of burner phones, as once you organize into a group, the potential response from law enforcement will proportionally, and in a lot of cases disproportionately, increase in size and strength. It's important to remember that when engaging in activity like this, you should be prioritizing your own health and safety over the objectives of the group. No protest, guerrilla activity, or any similar sort of activity is worth dying or going to prison for life over, so make conscious decisions about not just your digital security, but also your physical security. Ideally, you've done whatever it was you planned on doing and have managed to leave the area without too much trouble. Of course, that's the ideal situation, and isn't always what's going to happen. Sometimes you'll have to burn your device in the middle of an activity, and the timing on when to burn is really going to vary based on what you're involved in. Do you have a reason to believe the police are actively trying to hone in on your location, or you as an individual, and think you don't have much time left? Maybe you should go ahead and burn the device. Are you actively fleeing apprehension? Burn your device while moving. This is one of those decisions you'll have to make on the fly, so be prepared to have to do so at any time. I think it's pretty important to take a little bit to discuss why we're going through all this trouble. Let's say you fucked up and somehow the police got their hands on your burner. Generally, this is going to happen one of two ways. Either you got caught and they found it in your pocket or in your possession, or you left it somewhere that it could be found and they scooped it up either by triangulating it through the use of a stingray or by just combing the area. First, let's cover the latter option. You dumped it or left it somewhere that it ended up being found. Hopefully, you managed to actually get through the process of burning it. If so, you've saved yourself a lot of trouble and can basically stop caring at this point. It really doesn't matter that much if law enforcement have found the device, as long as you were following the best practices for private communication while using it. Now, if you weren't able to burn it in time, it's really going to depend on how you used it. If you were careful about how you stored contacts and communicated with them, then there isn't a whole lot that law enforcement can gain from the device besides the messages between yours and other burners, the location data of those devices, and the IMEI, as well as the IMSI if you didn't get rid of the SIM.
What they can do with that information will vary heavily based on any kind of investigation they're running. The more serious the thing you did was, the more likely there's some task force out there investigating it and following any thread they can find. The good news is that if you were smart enough about your communication, then actually linking that device to you is going to be a very difficult thing for investigators to do. Let's say you got apprehended and the burner was found on you. It's probably safe to assume that in this case you wouldn't have had time to burn it, or would only have been able to partially burn it. Ideally, you were being smart about your communication, because the investigators are going to immediately be able to link your device to you. They will have no problem breaking into a device like this with a simple warrant, and most of the time you won't have it encrypted or locked anyway, so everything you've done with it will be laid out right in front of them. Now, of course, I have to talk about what would happen if you weren't careful. If you managed to actually dump the device, but weren't able to burn it, and investigators got their hands on it, they would immediately have the means of getting a warrant to access that device, and will again have everything on it laid out in front of them. If you were careful about your communication, that would be all fine and great, but let's assume you weren't. Maybe you or someone else said someone's real first name by mistake. That gives the investigators a name and an alias to link together, as well as a burner number. This multiplies the danger by a substantial amount, because for every person involved in this type of setup, you're increasing the number of people you're relying on to stay private and secure. For every person who wasn't careful, the investigators have more threads to pull at and inevitably uncover much more information than you might want them to. You never know when someone else forgot to separate the signals and activated their burner at home. Now, the cops have rolled them up and they're snitching on everyone. Not great. Try to avoid that sort of thing. Alright, either you've finished whatever you were doing, or shit has hit the fan. Either way, it's time to burn your device. What do we do? Obviously, time is a major factor here. First things first, you need to start moving. If you can stand in one place and do this, that's great, but not likely if you've made the decision that you need to burn. Do not stand still while trying to burn your device if you think you may potentially be about to be apprehended by someone. Depending on how and what you've communicated using the device, it may be best to as quickly as possible start a factory reset. While that's happening, take the SIM out of it and snap it in half. Throw the pieces away as far as you can get them from each other. Normally, you wouldn't want to take a SIM out while the phone is on, but this isn't a normal circumstance. Yeet it. If you had time to factory wipe the device, that's great. You can now choose to either just turn it off, stick it in your pocket, and continue on with your day, or you can throw it away. If you're extra paranoid, you can snap it in half too, but honestly, if you made it through the factory reset, it may not even be worth throwing away, because you can always just get a new SIM card. What about if you don't have time for that? The best first action is snapping that SIM card. The best follow-up action is to snap the phone in half and throw the thing as far as you can from you, preferably in different directions, preferably while moving very quickly away from whatever the reason is that you need to burn your device. Hey Crux, can't snap this SIM. It's too flexible. Set it on fire. I'm not joking. Burn it. It's plastic containing wires and circuits. If you can't get it to break, then burning is just as good of an option. If all else fails, displace. Get the hell away from it as quickly as you can, or rather, get it the hell away from your device. Now that the smoke is cleared, whatever objectives you were trying to achieve were met, and the phone has been burned, what do we do? Well, that depends on how you burned the phone. If you only destroyed the SIM, then at this point, you can factory reset the device if you didn't earlier, get a new SIM, and start from square one with the steps laid out in this video. If you dumped or destroyed the device, then now is the time to change up where you're buying and what you're buying. Try to not rely on buying the same device repeatedly, as that can build up a profile against you. There are plenty of brands that you can cycle through if you need to regularly replace your burner, and likely plenty of stores selling them so you don't have to keep going back to the same one over and over. Keep your OPSEC in mind when replacing burned devices. As per usual with these videos, I think it's very important to stress that you shouldn't be overly paranoid about a lot of this stuff. Manage your OPSEC properly. Hell, put in any amount of effort, and you're more secure than most people. Just remember that most of us aren't important enough to actually dedicate resources towards spying on. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take precautions, but does mean you shouldn't be too paranoid. And that's it. That's all I have for you today. If you appreciated this video, please drop a like and hit the subscribe button. All of the interaction from you folks is what keeps this channel alive in the algorithm. So thank you, and see you next time.